It's been a good few months since I felt the desire to even record anything, but with the DMC anime from Netflix imminently releasing, I figure, fuck it. There's something for me to talk about here, so I am. Plus, it helps that I'm bored as shit, so why not? So to give you guys some context, I am a pretty good DMC fanboy. I've been playing the series basically as long as I've known about myself. I played 1 and especially 3 religiously as a kid, and I've always followed what the series is doing. When DMC 5 was announced, like, over half a decade ago, Jesus Christ, you can imagine my fanboy hype, and I generally thought that the game met those expectations. So when they announced that Netflix would be doing a DMC anime, I was kind of two minds about it. Like, some of the seasons of Castlevania are really, really fucking good. Edgerunners was fantastic, probably one of the best animated shows I've watched in my entire life. But for every one of those, you've got schlock like the Witcher anime, the Dota anime, and a bunch of other stuff typically produced by Studio Mir, unfortunately. That's the same studio that's going to be behind this. And from the preview image and information, at least the older material, it seemed like these were going to be like young Dante adventures. It would be set between 3 and 1, and it would star a younger Dante who's closer to his characterization in 3, hanging out with Lady and getting involved in some kind of demonic nonsense as usual. But the impetus for the creation of this video really came from the newer material, the newer trailers, and some of the leaked behind-the-scenes information that points to this show not being set even in the game continuity at all. It seems like this is going to be a retelling of DMC3 using material from the prequel novel DMC3 and the DMC3 manga that was never finished. And my immediate knee-jerk reaction to that was, fuck no, that's a really fucking bad idea. Why would you intentionally draw comparisons between yourself and DMC3? And while my opinion isn't reversed exactly, I'm going to try and take a more measured approach to this because it's a bit more complicated than just, oh, they're remaking DMC3, it's auto shit. For one thing, I do think it's kind of cool that some of the elements from the DMC supplementary material are going to be adapted. Before, I guess, DMC5, the DMC supplementary material, and I guess even the franchise itself was very fragmented. It was kind of scattershot all over the place. And it wasn't until DMC5 that a concerted effort was made to explain this is where DMC2 takes place, this is how these events relate to this, even Tony Redgrave and things from like Dante's like DMC1 from the Kamiya days lore was brought into 5, which was pretty cool. And so that is like a net positive of the show. It is cool to see the White Rabbit being involved. It could be even cool that if some of the material from the unfinished DMC3 manga, the Lady chapter more specifically, could be incorporated into this for some story material. And I do think that Lady could be one of the things that this show executes probably not as well as the original game, but Lady's story does have enough holes left in it that you could do cool stuff. You could do the scene where her mother is sacrificed, show more of her relationship with Arkham. There is potential there, but concerning the other stuff, that's really where I think this show is going to hit a brick wall and it's not going to be able to bring it down. Out of all the games in the entire series, DMC3 is the most complete, satisfying story. Every character in it, out of its small cast, has a satisfying beginning, middle, and end. Dante starts off as a cocksure rookie demon hunter who doesn't care about his family lineage, and he realizes that no, Sparta isn't just some name, he was someone who mattered, someone who made big sacrifices both personal and for other people's lives to save the world, and Dante decides to honor that. Virgil tries to get the power of Sparta so he can fully reject his humanity, but not only does he fail, but he ends up becoming a pawn of Mundus, the very same enemy of his father, and the killer of his mom. Lady realizes that her father really was a monster from the beginning. His manipulation in mid-game to try and turn her against Virgil so he can manipulate her was nothing but a ruse. He was a monster. He deserved to die, and the heartbreaking conclusion to that is still one of the fucking craziest things I've ever seen done in like a big AAA game. Like a fratricide isn't something that video games typically tackle in the way that they do. And then you've got the big climactic battle between Dante and Virgil, literally on the precipice between the human and the demon realms, where Virgil flings himself into the demon world. and ends up where he ends up, unfortunately. It's a satisfying story. There's really not much there except some, I guess, backstory material for Lady that I mentioned that you can really expand upon. And I think that what's going to happen with this show is that they're going to draw a lot of unfavorable comparisons between themselves and DMC3. And DMC3, the original one, the game, is almost certainly going to completely trounce them and leave them in the dust. Now, you might say, well, is it really fair to compare the potential remake in the TV show to the video game? They're different mediums. This is done today. That was done in 2005. Is that really fair? I will say it is fair, because if you intentionally, knowingly go to remake or retell one of not one of, but the most popular stories in the DMC franchise, you have to either deliver like an ungodly A game, or you're going to be left with kind of a turd on your face. And I think that is what's going to happen to the show. Even if it ends up being good, even if it ends up being great, the fact that you chose to retell 3 is just not, on a baseline, gonna sit well with a lot of people. And I can already see that the discourse around the show is going to be fucking annoying. There's going to be people who are going to say the show does absolutely nothing well, even if it does execute some of its elements good. I can already also see the gamer.net religiously writing article after article about how DMC3 was actually always shit, guys, and the show fixed it, if that article doesn't already fucking exist. But going back to the show itself, what are my personal concerns beyond the idea of retelling it? Well, for one thing, it looks like cheap Netflix anime fodder. I know Studio Mir has a lot of talented animators. They are a solid studio. In fact, they've done some stuff that I really like. They helped work on X-Men 97, which I thought was one of the nicest and best surprises of last year. But this thing just does not look that good, guys. It looks like literally every other generic Studio Mir show ever. Like if Korra, Voltron, and what else did they fucking do? The guys from Dota showed up in this. Like, I would not blink an eye. And that's not a good thing for me. Like, the studio's, I guess, style is so overexposed. It's been the same fucking thing in literally everything they've ever done. And to see that with DMC is just kind of disappointing, especially because DMC is usually a very visually, not just pleasing series to look at, but there's like a kinetic energy to it, the way the fight scenes are directed, especially how the cutscenes are directed. This show just seems to lack any and all of that complete energy. Even the way it's lit looks very flat and boring. And it's also just kind of weird to even look at these characters in this kind of style where like Korra could show up at any second and not look a bit out of place in it. I also really don't like Lady's design. I'm sorry, she just looks like a generic Voltron character. I've heard that that's not going to be her design for the entire show, and that's supposed to be like a uniform she has because she's a member of, I guess, some kind of anti-demon police task force thing. But still, it's not what I really would have liked for her. I think DMC5 has nearly the perfect design for her, and with a few tweaks, I think you easily just could have backported that design to her and given it to her here, and it would have been fine. I'm also not really crazy about Dante's design. Kind of like the show itself, Dante feels like a mishmash amalgamation of a bunch of different Dantes from across the series. He kind of has that look from 4, but also 2 and a little bit of 3 thrown in. Like, he doesn't really stand out amongst the Dantes, and which is really weird because every single Dante, even the one from 2, they all look like the character, but they also have like a distinct visual appearance, and this version of Dante really doesn't have that. In fact, I saw some of the sheets for the prototype designs, and some of them just looked way, way better than this. And lastly, on the subject of Dante himself, I'm really not a fan of Johnny Young Bosch playing Dante. It's just strange and distracting to hear the voice of Nero come out of Dante's mouth. I know that Johnny, he auditioned to play Dante in DMC3, and I think he almost even won it, but then Ruben Langdon won instead. And that's fine, that's a cool bit of trivia, but I don't know, man. It's just really distracting that you're setting out to make a new version of Dante in his own continuity, and he has the same voice as Dante's nephew from the game continuity. I personally would have just recast the role. So where I'm left off right now is I'm not salty about the show exactly. There was always a part of me that was kind of holding back to wait and see what they were going to do with it. As I've said like a million times in this video already, I just think it's very ill-conceived to purposefully draw comparisons between yourself and DMC3. Would I like for them to prove me wrong, for them to actually make a really cool alternate take on 3? It could happen. I have been surprised before. But am I going to rush out and watch this immediately when it releases? I really don't know. I think I'm going to have to take a wait-and-see approach on this to see from some people whose opinions I trust whether I should even bother. The last thing I want to see, though, is to just get, like, another shitty DMC anime. I know the 2007 show has its fans. It has a really cool opening soundtrack and some cool scenes, but it really was boring as shit. And I'd be really sad if, like, the next attempt at a DMC anime amounted to just being trashy, but for different reasons, or just kinda painfully average Netflix anime fodder schlock. I think the series deserves better, and I think it could be served really well in an animated format, but signs right now point to this not being one of those. Hope I'm wrong, but we'll see.